All right, we are in Chapter 7. We are in Unit 2 and AP Stat still. We're still in Chapter 7 here going over some practice problems. Just trying to, what we were just going over is trying to figure out explanatory variables, response variables, which ones are which, do you see associations with them, and things like that. So, again, if I'm moving too fast for you, pause the video, write the problems down so you can kind of get a rough idea. But we were looking at some problems like these before in the last example, last video. And basically, here's what it is. Same idea. Which one's explanatory? Which one is response? And then see what you get for each. And it says when climbing mountains, the altitude versus temperature. So the higher up you get, right, is the temperature colder? Is it hot, right? For each week, ice cream cone sales and air conditioner sales. Is there a correlation technically between the more ice cream sold and air conditioners? Now, maybe not. We'll look into it. People get the age and their grip strength. All right. Does it necessarily mean that just because somebody is older that they are stronger to grip things? Yes and no. There might be some lurking variables with that too. And driver, blood alcohol level, and reaction time. And do you notice anything? So take a look here. The first one. The altitude is probably the explanatory. It's what you're plugging in. So how high something gets in the temperature in response. As you climb higher, normally the temperature drops. It's just normally what happens. The association would be negative and straight and pretty strong because it's something that's pretty consistent. Those of you will know the higher up you normally get on a mountain, the colder it naturally is. So what they're implying here is if I keep getting higher up, the temperature should drop, which is why they're saying that it's negative. This one, it says at first it appears that there should be no association, right? Because what does ice cream and air conditioning units have in common? All right, other than the fact that maybe it's a really hot day outside and people need to cool down. So maybe that's why they are together. It says when the lurking variable of temperature is considered, the association becomes more apparent. When the temperature is high, ice cream sales probably would tend to increase, right? Also, when the temperature is high, air conditioning sales tend to increase. Therefore, there is likely to be an increase in the sales of air conditioning units whenever there is an increase in ice cream. So the association would probably be positive and negative and moderate for the most part because you can't judge. Maybe there's a sale on air conditioning units and people just buy more. It doesn't mean that they're also buying ice cream. Either one of these could basically be explanatory and it would be fine. It wouldn't matter because there isn't this like direct plug in and get something out about there being association between the two. In part C, age is probably explanatory and grip would be the response because how old someone is, you would think, well, maybe the older they get, the stronger they can. But in the same respect, who's to say that a 16-year-old and a 36-year-old, like, is there really that big of a difference between how hard they can grip? I mean, maybe not, right? So the association is probably not positive or negative, but the point is it might end up being a little curved if you think about it, because a baby probably can't really grip much, and the older you get, they probably can't really grip much. So more than likely, it's probably you start getting a little older, and oh look, it appears as though you can grip a little bit more, but then it probably starts to go down the older you get. For maybe you have some kind of disease, maybe you have arthritis, and you can't grip anymore. So the very young would have a low grip strength, and the grip strength would increase. But after you're reaching a certain max, right, the grip strength would decline again. So maybe when you're elderly. So the point is, it would probably be some kind of curve shape, right, more than likely, and that would also be moderate. Wouldn't be overly strong. Blood alcohol and reaction time. As the blood alcohol level increases, so does time it takes to react to a stimulus. The more than likely what they're getting at is explanatory be the blood alcohol, and then your reaction time, right? The association is probably positive, and it's also probably a little curved because the scatter plot would probably be almost linear for low concentrations of alcohol in the blood, and then begin to rise dramatically with longer and longer reaction time. So the point that they're getting at is if they measure blood level and there's low and nothing's really happening, the higher up it gets, it probably starts spiking up to reaction time. the more alcohol you have. So instead of being linear, it might actually just shoot up at some point with a longer and longer reaction times for each increment increase in blood alcohol content, is what it was implying. Take a look at this one. Suppose you were to collect data for each pair of variables and you want to make a scatter plot. Which variable would you use for explanatory again, which one for response, and let's discuss it. So it says long distance calls, time, and cost. So oftentimes, if you, the old days when you'd make a long distance call, they would start charging you per minute basically. And what it's basically getting at is the longer I talk, shouldn't the price go up? And the problem is, yes, if it's the old manner, but we don't know how it is, so there technically could be a lurking variable that we don't know of. Maybe you have unlimited calls, so then with that, the price would be consistent. If long distance calls doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. Lightning strikes, distance from lightning, and then the time delay of the thunder. Oftentimes it gets closer and closer together, right? So the distance from the lightning that you are, so the farther away you are, the time delays probably of the thunder is also, the time is higher, so the distance you are. So you can probably use either way to make it happen. But then down here it says street light, it's apparent brightness and your distance from it. Oftentimes the street light is brighter the closer that you are to it. So the brightness, how bright something is, and your street distance, they might have them flip-flop. Maybe you might want to put that in, the distance you are from the street light, and then its brightness probably goes up depending on how you want to put it in, and the weight of a car and the age of an owner probably don't have a ton to do with anything. But time spent talking on the phone is probably the explanatory, putting that in, something you can measure, and the cost of the call is probably what the response is, and the longer you spend talking, normally the call cost. The association is probably positive, straight, and pretty moderate, since long distance companies normally charge. Now, again, we would have to know a little bit more, so you could argue that point that I said earlier about maybe the phone plan's the same, but the distance from lightning, right, the distance from the lightning could possibly be the explanatory, and the time delay of the thunder is the response. The farther away you are from the strike, the longer it takes for the thunder to reach your ears. So the association would also be positive, straight, and fairly strong, right? Since the speed of the sound is not a constant. Sound travels at a rate of roughly 770 miles per hour, depending on the temperature. The distance from a street light would probably be your explanatory, because it's what you're putting in, and it's something you can measure a little easier. And the brightness is probably the response, and the further away you are from the light, the less bright it is, which means it's probably decreasing, going down, or negative. And it could be a little curved, because it's probably at a certain point where, wow, you can really see, because you're like standing right beside it, but then there's probably a certain point where it does this kind of dip and then barely like a difference. Like, yes, I can't really judge how bright it is because it's about the same brightness. The distance and light intensity follow an inverse square relationship. Doubling the distance to the light source reduces its intensity. And then there's very little association between the weight of a car and the age of somebody, right? However, some might say that the older drivers tend to drive larger cars. You could, right? If that's the case, there may be some kind of positive straight association, but it'd be kind of weak because you need more proof than just that. All right, which of the scatter plots at the top of the next column, right, which of these match? So which one has, if I was looking at this, it does to me look like it has a pretty strong, this one definitely has a pretty strong correlation. This one's kind of strong as well. This one isn't very strong. This one isn't strong at all. So you're trying to match these up, right? So there's all of those, and it says, A, none of the scatter plots show little or no association. Like little or no. Like this, yeah, I mean, this is pretty weak, but basically what it's saying. This one would be the closest that you could try to argue, like there's no real association, but it still tends to look like it's decreasing. A negative association would definitely be 3, right? And 4 you could possibly argue as well, would be that way. A linear association. That's definitely linear. That's definitely going like it's linear in that one. So you could argue all four of those. That's just someone could argue that they don't think 4 is and that it's an A. D, a moderately strong association. So that's pretty strong, right? That's moderately strong, like the association between them. That's pretty moderate. I know some would argue, like, doesn't that look like a pretty strong association? But we would argue that both 1 and 3 are both very strong because they are tight, knit around each other, even though it's curved. You're noticing a pattern here. Taking a look at this one, same deal. If I was to say little to no association, that looks like it has an association. So does that. So does that. This one, I don't know how I draw the line. So I'm going to go with that one has no. A negative association, I'm going with that one. A linear association, definitely that one. I'm going to go with that one, but maybe not that one. A moderately strong association and very strong. I'm going to go with moderately. I'm going to go with very strong and very strong to me. So let's see what we got here. So number 1 definitely shows no association. A negative association, that's the only one that's going down. 2 and 4 have a linear association. They're going with 2 and 4, but not that one because, like I said, I feel like it's curving. But then it says a very moderate association. There's a lot. It's kind of thick, right? And it's curved. However, E, I would say, is pretty strong, and they're going to go with this one right here as well as both being kind of strong. Whereas, personally, because this is wider, I can understand it, but I don't think these are as straightforward as the last problem with it being very strong myself, but I could be wrong. All right, I will pause it right there, and when we come back, we will take a look at the IQ scores and see how they pan out.